I cannot wait for dawn to break. I must be on my way before I pass this way again. Be a many a dark day. The sheriff does not know my name. He does not know my face. But before the sun goes down again, you know them just the same. One kiss before I leave you, and one more for the wind. Every day I hope and pray to be with you again. Between a poor man's word and a rich man's gold, whose chances what you choose? Judge and jury close their eyes, and justice don't come true. Oh, run for what I haven't done. It's a long, hard long. It's got a silver spade that will dig my grave in Fort Smith, Arkansas. One kiss before I leave you, one more for the wind. Every day I hope and pray to be with you again. Down along the railroad track, waiting in the weeds. First freight train, leave the yard, be the one for me. Find a place on the boxcar roof where the wind cuts cold and deep. I don't need no railroad man, catch me in my sleep. One kiss before I leave you, one more for the wind. Every day I hope and pray to be with you again. To be with you again. Welcome, workers and friends. Welcome back to Anti-imperialist America. I'm your host, Dust James, the Marxist Leninist truck driver. I'm coming to you live from my humble home in rural North Carolina. Welcome in, welcome in. Sorry, I butchered that song. I'm feeling a little bit out of the night. I don't know if my blood pressure's acting up or what have you, but it's a wonderful late. It's very late for me. Very late Friday evening. Have a totally named land shark by the Margaritaville Brewing Company, owned by the great country singer Jimmy Buffett, who made a whole profit, made his whole career on one song. And to me, it's like a cheaper version of Sol. Sol is one of my favorite Mexican beers. It's kind of, it's really good on a really hot day. This is like a cheaper version of that. Jimmy Buffett has this kind of like country, I don't know, kind of like beach bum theme. It's kind of culturally insensitive today, if you ask me, the parrot heads and what have you. The song I just sung was To Be With You Again, a song by the bluegrass group, the Steel Drivers. The lead singer of that group was Chris Stapleton. I'm absolutely excited today because, well, I think earlier this week I subscribed to the YouTube channel for Farm Aid. And, I haven't been to Farm Aid since 2016. And I went to Farm Aid with my dad and my late great brother Ryan, who I miss dearly. It was a great memory of mine. 2016, I saw my favorite country singer, Sturgill Simpson, in the Big Four, Willie Nelson, Neil Young, John Mellencamp, Dave Matthews Band. But I learned this week that Farm Aid is going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh, North Carolina is only 30 minutes from my house. 30 minutes from my house, they're going to do Farm Aid. And they've been doing Farm Aid in the Midwest and all over the place. In 2016, when I drove 5.5 hours near DC to see Farm Aid last time. So I am excited about Farm Aid. And actually, the lead singer of that front group, um, Chris Stapleton, who's gone on to do great work. Um, his cover of Tennessee Whiskey is absolutely amazing. And I remember one time going to the truck stop, and there was this big black trucker in the rig next to me, and he was just singing as hard as he could to Tennessee Whiskey by Chris Stapleton. And Chris Stapleton got a real kind of, it's like they call a lot of it neo-traditional country, alternative country. But really it's kind of like bluesy southern rock kind of vibe. I know I butchered it, but it is what it is. Um, Shout out to David Fox. Thank you for joining us. Boom. Hello, everyone. Just finished canvassing with another comrade from the Eureka Center for Political Innovation in Melbourne. Another announcement. Well, let me finish the deal on the on Farm Aid. Farm Aid is a local is a music kind of like a festival. It's a 1-day music festival / fundraiser that happens once a year. It's led by Willie Nelson. Once a year to support family farms. And the music scene is like, it's not the pop country. It's got like 90s alternative, some alternative, Americana, underground, grassroots, real fucking country music. And I'm super fucking excited about it. That's coming up, I think, in the fall sometime. But any of my fans, if you want to come into North Carolina and go see the fucking Farm Aid with me, hell yeah, let's go see fucking Farm Aid. Probably get lawn tickets or whatever. We can do a whole anti-imperialist America fucking crew. Go out there. I don't know. Maybe we can secretly leaflet for some CPI stuff or whatever. It'd be fucking fun as hell. So, right on with that. And thank you, David. And everybody should subscribe to the new channel. I don't know, David, if you can stick that link in the comments. I'm not sure if you're able to or not. For the new YouTube channel, everybody needs to go out and subscribe to the new YouTube channel for the newly created Eureka Center for Political Innovation, Eureka CPI. It was formerly Australians for a New Democracy, but looks like David got its way and he got it changed to Eureka CPI. That's really great. An Australian Center for Political Innovation affiliated group. Now, let's see. Just another quick announcement. Not next week, but the week after that. I can bring the calendar up. Oh, it is next week. So this week, tomorrow. Tomorrow on Working Class Revolt, our young comrade from the United Kingdom, Brother William Morrison, has organized a member from the Workers' Party of the UK. And we are going to have a discussion on healthcare in the United States and the United Kingdom. That will be 6 p.m. Eastern if folks want to check that out. Another announcement on the 6th, not tomorrow, but the Saturday after that, in Chicago, specifically near Chicago and Deerfield, Illinois, at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. I will be speaking at the Center for Political Innovation Conference, Unite Against the Imperialist, along with the great Dan Kovalik, Peter Coffin, Tara Reid. I know I'm forgetting somebody. I know there's four, and Garland Nixon. How could I forget about Brother Garland Nixon? I will be speaking with those four great individuals, the Center for Political Innovation Conference in Dearborn, Illinois. Doors open at 1 p.m. Looking forward to that. Let's see. Any other remarks? Um, any other questions, comments? Maybe I can go over his comment. You ever heard of Stick to Your Guns? They're a hardcore band and they're Marxist, probably one of the biggest, exceptionally Marxist band with the biggest audience aside from Rage Against the Machine. It sounds like a country band. I don't know what I don't even know what a hardcore band is. Probably like noise or something. I don't know, brother. But I'm glad you looked into that, and you might, and I'll look into that. I'll check that out. Heard of Stick to Your Guns, and I do know about Rage Against the Machine. Pretty big Rage Against the Machine fan. Rage Against the Machine's more like new metal, kind of like mix between hip hop and hip hop and rock, kind of that new metal kind of sound from the '90s. Right on. Shout out to Chris, the the Marxist Leninist butcher out there in Canada. Right on. Glad to have you here, brother. Whew. I want to go over some of these lyrics, some of the feelings that this lyrics from the song "To Be With You Again" kind of broke up. In the very first verse, he talks about how he has to leave town because he has to run away from the law. And then in the next verse, this one's brought up a lot of memories and thoughts in my mind. Between a poor man's word and a rich man's gold, whose chances would you choose? And that is a very hard lyric. I mean, I'll go ahead and read the next part of it. The judge and jury close their eyes. Justice don't come true. How hard is that of a reality of the American injustice system, where the majority of cases don't go to trial. People have plea bargains. The majority of people, you can buy either you're well connected or you can get a good lawyer and you can pay your way out of things. But for the working class and oppressed, wrongly accused of a crime or pushed in to situations where criminal activity may have been the best option, end up in jail or on death row, or in the case of this song, running from the law. I want to talk a little bit about family. I had a family member who had to go pick up my brother. Oh my, I'm sorry. My blood pressure is a little high tonight, and I'm a little tired. Um, one of my family members had to go pick up my dad early in the morning, and they had had a little bit of drink the night before. On the way back, it was pouring rain. They had to take a left turn on a blind curve, and out of nowhere came this Mercedes Benz, probably going 95 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, 50 miles over the speed limit. And he crashed into my brother taking that left turn who didn't see him. And the person driving the Mercedes died. My family member survived. They took him to the hospital, checked his blood alcohol content. There was a small bit of alcohol still in his bloodstream. The person driving the Mercedes was going probably 50 miles over the speed limit based on the crash. They kind of covered it up a little bit, but it was like, a wealthy to do. I think he owned either a mechanic shop or a car dealership, something like that. Family was out for blood. My brother, it was my brother, one of my brothers, and I have a bunch of brothers. One of my brothers ended up getting charged with manslaughter. The accident wasn't his fault. It was the person who died. It's accident because they found some trace of alcohol in his blood. He was charged with manslaughter, which is a felony, and it ruined his chances at finding a good job in town. At least for lowered his income potential for years to come. And we didn't have a lawyer, didn't have any connections. We're white folks. That's how the fucking legal system works. So it's always works. The entire injustice system is nothing about justice. Simply maintaining some stability in society for the benefit of the profits of the capitalist, specifically monopoly capitalist. The legal system, throws poor black and brown people under the bus constantly. Simply gets rid of people in society that are causing troubles, even though a lot of those troubles that they're causing society were caused by that society themselves and not exactly the behavior of that individual. It's a sad, sad day. And in this song, this bluegrass song, he didn't do the crime. you know? Then the next line, I thought it was interesting. Down along the railroad tracks, waiting in the weeds, the first freight train to leave the yard will be the one for me. Find a place on a boxcar roof where the wind cuts cold and deep. I don't know I don't know need no rail. I don't need no rail man to catch me in my sleep. He's talking about hopping trains. Hopping trains is an interesting imagery. There's this kind of like romantic, like American hobo kind of like vision of train hopping. And train hopping has always been a very dangerous thing to engage in. Not just the trying to jump on a moving train or hide where a train is, stored, where you can go in there. But there was this book I read from North Carolina to California and back again without a ticket. This whole book was about hopping trains, and it was set in the early 20th century, early 1900s in North Carolina. It was set. It started in North Carolina, but actually showed this parts of the South. It showed some of the culture at the time throughout the entire country. It talked about a little bit of the labor movement. I wonder if I can. I found it on LibriVox. I'm back again without a ticket. It's a book by. It's not coming up. North Carolina. There it is. It's called um, From North Carolina to Southern California Without a Ticket and How I Did It. Giving My Exciting Experiences as a Hobo by John Peel is the author. It's interesting because I've traveled to most of the towns that are described in that book, and a lot of the ones in the South, and the railroad man in the song would literally throw people off trains, beat people to death. Um, it was the justice system isn't as nice. I mean, we think the justice system is bad now. Justice system in the early 1900s was despicable. I mean, the railroad bulls or what have you would murder people for getting on the trains. It's crazy. Um, so that book, that I read, it was interesting because it talked about the labor movement, it talked about a bunch of other stuff. It was great. But this whole idea of like killing yourself for basic transportation is kind of like an entire metaphor. I think Thursday, I had a hard day. I woke up. First of all, I slept through my alarm. Then after sleeping through my alarm, I I was such in a hurry to get to work. I ended up hitting a deer in my Silverado, and now I have to replace a light. I don't know how much that's going to cost. And I hit the deer and kept on going because I didn't want to be late for work. And you think about no public transportation in the United States. We don't have any high speed rail. We have the Amtrak in North Carolina. Amtrak looks like it's from the 70s. Like it's old trains. Oh, and the ticket prices are way too high. It's not. It's only like one belt from like I think it goes Raleigh, Greensboro, Charlotte. That's where the major highway system is. It's the only place where the train covers, and it's like way out of date. And we're like forced to buy personal automobiles to transport ourselves from work to work and back, especially in rural areas where people travel 20, 30 minutes, an hour or more to try to go to work. And when you're barely making rent and you're barely making food, and now you got higher inflation, higher gas prices. Let's say you have a problem go wrong with your car. I mean, parts can be a significant amount of money. Half of the American workers can't afford a $400 emergency. Could cause them to go homeless. Homeless population is increasing. I mean, you look at the jobs we do. I mean, I was an over-the-road truck driver for 7 years, 7 or 8 years. I've been local for a year, and it's had being in the amount of stress on the road for so long has negatively affected my health. We literally die to make money, to pay money for vehicles, to keep and to fix vehicles, to go to work so we can kill ourselves to make more money. We literally kill ourselves to get around. Just like those who would hop the trains. That's kind of a bit on that song. It was actually a video I want to do. The name of today's show is the Carolina Rot. And there's a video I wanted to play. I can share screen. Um, Inside North Carolina's tragic rot belt, and it's done actually by libertarian commentators. And the libertarian commentators, it's interesting that a libertarian would highlight issues of poverty in rural North Carolina because most of the socialists and communists are hooked in with urban areas around universities, and a lot of rural poverty is ignored or not talked about by socialists, so-called socialists and communists, and it should be. And some of the only people talking about it are the libertarians. And the libertarians don't have any solutions to the problem. The libertarian solution to the problem is less government, because the government, the bourgeois government, does fuck up things for the people, because the bourgeois government is working for the monopoly capitalist. But more neoliberalism isn't going to fix anything. More neoliberalism is just going to make it worse. Here we go. Shout out to Waba Coleman. Good night, all. Let's see. I'm going to go through this before I get into this video I'm going to review. David Fox. Hey, Dust. Would you and other comrades would be interested in organizing the next CPI event in the southern states? I would love to do that. I know there's a few comrades up in Virginia. Maybe we could have it in Virginia. That'd be cool. Around near the Capitol. Maybe that'd be fun. Right on. So I'm going to play this video by these libertarian group about poverty in North Carolina. And the play, everybody's heard of the Rust Belt, which is where manufacturing left the country, starting with Reagan in the 80s, and going further and further, monopolization decrease. Now we're going to talk about another part of the country that's almost forgotten, parts of rural North Carolina, which instead of called the Rust Belt are called the Rot Belt. So let's go ahead and watch this video, and maybe I'll pause it and comment from time to time. Add to stream. Very good. I'm gonna have to get my headphones. I can't hear myself sing when I have my headphones on, so maybe I was like partly tone deaf by the time. Let's see. There we go.
If you drive around the state of North Carolina these days, you might be a little baffled. Sure, there's a lot of talk about how fast the Raleigh area is growing. We know how much money's flowing into Charlotte, and the coast might be the best coast in the country. But as you drive around many of the rural areas of this state, you're going to see some communities falling apart. Entire counties in some parts of this state have gone from prosperous to poverty in a matter of decades. It's estimated that 6% of the entire state of North Carolina lives in a distressed community just like this. Now, the Midwest and parts of the Northeast have areas that have been decimated by the auto industry. We call it the Rust Belt. Places like Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Detroit and Buffalo, auto jobs left, and the communities are never really recovered. Now, down here in the Carolinas, we have what's called the Rot Belt. These are areas that have been decimated by loss of farming jobs. We're going to drive around some of these places and talk about it a little bit and see why these places are literally rotting away. The Rot Belt. Now, you could draw up a rough approximation as to where the economic decline of North Carolina is the worst, and people could argue about where the exact boundaries are. But for the sake of perspective, the area we're going to focus on is here, an area in the north central part of the state along the Virginia state line, and down here in the southwestern part of the state along the South Carolina border. The area we're going to drive through today is the latter, and I'll specifically focus on Robeson County. But we're going to see footage of other Rot Belt hubs in this state. All of the areas we're driving through are still surrounded by farmland, just like this. Robeson County has some of the...
I'm going to go ahead and stop it right there. Hopefully folks can still hear me. If anybody could get in the comments and say if they still hear me, that would be good. So yes, it talked about, everybody knows about the Rust Belt, but what about, rural places in the South and, in other places as well, but specifically North Carolina. And you call it the Rot Belt because it's hot down here, and literally boarded up downtowns, houses left in disrepair, and things literally just rot into the ground. They don't get fixed. What was prosperous towns just are allowed to rot away. There's people in these places. I mean, there's resources and talent. I mean, if it could only be unlocked, it could only be invested in. If we could invest in the people, if we own the banks, then they wouldn't be investing in military and prisons. They'd be investing in schools, in industry, you know? So let's go ahead and continue on with the video.
Poorest and forsaken communities in all of North Carolina. Right now, we're in the community of Parkton, population 435. Now, going back to the 1960s, the population here was more than double that. Look at that population loss, people. There's abandoned homes all over the place, and other streets look like they'll be all but wiped away at some point. It's a patchwork of homes, empty and overgrown lots, abandoned streets, and empty storefronts. About 1 in 4 people here in Parkton lives at or below the poverty line, and that number's going up all the time. A whopping 75% of kids live in poverty here. The folks who live here say it's quiet here, and as you can see, that's certainly the case. There's really not a lot going on here anymore, and it's certainly cheap. As you can see on this map, there's a bunch of houses that are sold here for well under $20,000. Parkton's decaying right before our eyes. Like many other towns in eastern North Carolina, it's a shadow of its former bustling self. The biggest reasons for the decay are a loss of textile mill jobs and a dramatic downturn in tobacco farming. A lot of the textile jobs moved overseas ages ago, and farming in the area has become dominated by large-scale farming operations. At one point, small family farms dominated this fertile land.
I'm going to stop them right there. This is actually interesting. What I noticed, I'm a anti-imperialist. I am against the monopoly capitalist. And a lot of the so-called democratic socialist, people who are just socialist or more rad-lib communist, they're constantly talking about, why do you say monopoly capitalist? Why don't you just say capitalist? Is there a better form of capitalism you're looking for? No. You sound like the right wingers. No. I have to specifically say the monopoly capitalist. Because what destroys these small towns? The big agri companies coming in, putting the small farms out of business, taking money directly out of the town. There's a significant difference between capitalism and monopoly capitalism. All capitalism becomes, monopoly form, but we got to understand that there's actually elements of small farmers, bourgeois, or even other sections of the bourgeois in the current system that we can unite with and fight against the very small people who are actually running this country. And the libertarians will actually be more likely to call out the monopolies than so-called socialists. And it's crazy. They don't understand, the material and political and economic reality that's happening here with the further monopolization. So let's go ahead and continue.
Not anymore. Then all these big farming corporations move in, and they handle all the farming needs now, mister. Of course, they don't have a connection to the land or the community. They just want to make a profit. But when this happens, the smaller farms go out of business. And with that go lots of jobs. So people leave, and the small businesses go with them. Mom and pops have been replaced by dollar stores and Chick-fil-A's. A lot of people are out of work, and many rely on welfare payments to get by. Others get addicted to drugs and booze. Now, later in the video, we're going
to... I want to stop them there. You heard the negative connotation around welfare. Welfare, although we would prefer high-paying jobs, us as socialists, especially in the United States, where we don't have a welfare state like they do in the junior imperialist powers, where they're allowed a stronger workers' movement because they're not dominated by the absolute core of imperialism and the strongest monopolies in the world. We barely have a welfare state in the United States. People, you see the conditions that people are in. People aren't really being helped. There's not a lot of jobs. A lot of the jobs moved out. Yes, drugs are a major problem. Another thing he's not talking about, this is a libertarian. I think it's a more mainstream libertarian. But when you talk about drugs in the rural community, you can't talk, and I've said this point over and over and over again, you can't not mention drugs without mentioning Oliver North, the CIA, the introduction of crack cocaine into the black and brown urban communities in the 80s. And then more recently, the proliferation of pills, meth, and other substances, and heroin with the war in Afghanistan, where after they invaded Afghanistan, the poppy production skyrocketed in Afghanistan. And then all of a sudden, you have heroin and the synthetic versions sold by the pharmaceutical companies was overprescribed in these communities. So you got to talk about how, just like they did to the Chinese with opium, keeping them in this century of humiliation, they have used drugs to subdue and criminalize and keep down black and brown urban communities, as well increasingly rural communities as well.
To talk to a professor who lives and works in the South, and he's going to offer a lot of perspective on how these communities have declined and what their futures might be. The decline of economic fortunes in places like Parkton have also impacted the region's health outcomes. The average life expectancy for people here is only 73 years, while 100 miles away in Wake County, where Raleigh is, folks live to be about 81 years. A real big difference. Young people here in Robeson County experience a death rate that's 60% higher than the state average, and the homicide rate here is more than triple the state average. There's also a big void when it comes to healthy food options, which is ironic considering the area is surrounded by, well, tens of thousands of acres of vegetable fields. If it wasn't for the churches here, even more people would go hungry. The leaders who manage these communities always try the same things to try to turn.
I'm going to stop him there. He hinted on a lot of good issues. These are farming communities where the people are not connected to the large corporate farms. A lot of migrant labor is used, which is not paid nearly what it should be. This means we should organize the farm workers. The Farm Labor Organizing Committee is a great example, and they took to heart the idea of uniting against the monopolies. The Farm Labor Organizing Committee would actually organize with the growers. The growers are the owners, some of the small owners of the tobacco farms. They would organize with the employers of the tobacco workers to try to get more money for the owners, the petty bourgeois, so they could pay the workers more. So you had both the small owners, the petty bourgeois, united with the oppressed migrant workers against both the tobacco company, the international tobacco companies, and the banks that backed them up. This is exactly what I'm talking about. How an alliance between the petty bourgeois, the oppressed proletariat, against the real enemies that are keeping everybody down, which is the monopoly capitalist. The Farm Labor Organizing Committee could do that, but you're not going to hear that from this libertarian commentator. Now he's about to say some more libertarian stuff, and I'm going to refute that as well.
Turn things around, asking the state for more money for the struggling schools, asking for more money to attract new businesses, and more money to boost agriculture production. Sometimes they get the money, sometimes they don't, but it doesn't seem to matter what money comes in. The rot belt further rots. Sure, there's nonprofits and government programs in place to help the remaining small-time farmers with grants and to market their goods, but the fact is, so many people in this area have just turned their backs on farming, many of them forever. And they're not transitioning to white-collar jobs either.
So I'm going to stop him there. He's trying to blame the oppressed people for the working class that's been left behind, left in economic decay because they don't want to work. And when they're on welfare, this is an absolute ridiculous lie. The few jobs in the factories, I deliver plywood in the town of Kingston, which is mentioned in this video, and I see, this is the Black Belt South, majority African workers, showing up early as hell, working overtime in a right to work state, traveling an hour or two to get there, and then bringing back that to these impoverished communities. You're going to tell me that people don't want to work hard. That is not the problem. The problem is the lack of access to jobs, the lack of access to education. So I'm going to keep going.
Only 12% of the population in this part of the state has a college degree. It's just generational here. Some communities like this have to resort to volunteer firefighters, and some will go months without a police officer until one can be lured in to take the badge. Two other distressed communities I visited in North Carolina's Rot Belt were Lumberton and Kinston. It's not any better in these communities. In fact, since they're much larger than Parkton, you could say the problem is just worse. I mean, look at how many homes in Lumberton have sold for under $20,000 in the last year. That's not a sign of a boom in town, I'll tell you that. And in nearby Kinston, things are so bad, they're actually knocking down entire blocks because so many people have left. Look at this place. Man, oh man.
Maybe there's an opportunity for people to move to these small towns, Nick. You told me a lot of people email you because they want cheap.
I'm going to stop him right there. This libertarian is basically calling for the gentrification of these already poor towns. And basically, they're saying, oh, all the stuff is going online. People can work from home. Okay, that's going to bring in a little bit of money to the town, maybe boost a little bit of the cervix other, but everything is so controlled by the monopolies. People coming in is going to raise rent. It's going to gentrify. People are going to be displaced. Not all the money go, and a lot of things are so monopolized now that small businesses don't even operate any longer. Everybody's ordering shit on Amazon. Everybody's ordering from these big companies. So the few people that are going to come in from regions where things are better off, and maybe do some online jobs. They're going to buy from Amazon, buy from the Walmart 20 minutes over. I mean, and all it's going to do is raise rent and push people out of these communities. And honestly, I think this person right here may be getting money from the real estate industry. And the real estate industry isn't our friend. And they've been gentrifying, pushing people out, raising people's taxes, and generally not caring about those with the least amount of power and money in our society. And this is a growing trend. I'm seeing real estate is gone through the roof. Rents are going up. And we don't need all these people fleeing these cities, coming in here, trying to take over and redirect and remanage and try to control the towns.
Places to live where it's quiet.
You know what, Mappy? Maybe you're right. Is there opportunity here? I mean, there are some good pockets in these places. There tends to be a sense of community here. The infrastructure's here, and there's internet. There's cheap land, that's for sure. Maybe we should think about redefining what makes a good place to live. Maybe these small towns are all that's left in America for people who want affordability and some space. I bet there aren't any riots or homeless camps in these places. I'm happy. Something to think about, that's for sure. But for now, let's.
All right, that right there. No riots or homeless camps. Well, first of all, the riots you're talking about, Black Lives Matter. A lot of this is urban rebellions against the unjust conditions and police brutality. I know some of the Black Lives Matter movement has been somewhat manipulated by the Democratic Party in recent, but if you look at the beginnings of the Black Lives Matter movement, it was proletarian, black nationalist, legitimate response to unjust police brutality in its cities. And there's a lot of police, no one talks about it, but there's a lot of police brutality in small towns. But you don't have as concentration, a biggest concentration of people. The law enforcement knows everybody's face and knows everybody, and there's huge stigma against being a rabble rouser, doing this or that. someone who speaks out against the cops. There's a lot of police brutality in these small towns, especially against black folks. And not only if someone acts out against the cops, people are so scared because they know if they act out against the police system, if they call the police out, it could mean, they're so small towns with like one or two people owning all the factories, owning all the land. It'll make it hard for their family members. They do this stuff. They blackmail people. They make it hard for people to get jobs, make it hard for people to get housing. They basically push people out of the community if they stand up. And it's not that people don't want to fight back. There's a lot of repression, both socially and physical, in these small towns, with corrupt police departments.
Bring in an expert who can help lend some perspective on what these communities are going through. I'll call him now. Okay, guys, so right now we have a special guest that's going to talk about this with us. He's a professor of economics and finance at Birmingham Southern College, and he's the author of the textbook Basic Economics. It's Dr. Paul Cleveland. How's it going, Paul?
I'm doing well, Nick. I'm excited to be with you and to talk about some of these things today.
Yeah. So in your book, you've advocated for limited government. And, I'm doing a video on small town economics and how the farming communities have been impacted by changes in federal policy and just the day-to-day life of a farmer. And
I'm just going to stop him right there. These are obviously libertarians, and the government is the superstructure. The real problem is the economic base, which is monopoly capitalism, which honestly they describe slightly when they talk about the big monopoly farms. And yes, the libertarians are correct when the government works for the monopolies, but the government isn't ever really going to work for small business. The government needs to work for the people, and in a socialist society, it's actually better for small business. And Nicaragua, they have microloans to help small businesses that invest in small businesses that benefit the community. All of this libertarian dreamland where everybody is like successful with a small business is probably more of a reality in socialist countries with socialist policies.
Yeah. How have federal policies that regulate agriculture impacted small communities in the South like this?
Well, it really began a long time ago. Kind of the first thing that government did, and this was in the middle of the 19th century, with the land grant programs, a lot of immigration, and they were virtually giving away land out in the Midwest, and so you had all sorts of people going out there to get the land and become farmers. At that point, what happened was, that displaced a lot of farmers in the East, and they turned a lot of their land back over to forestation instead of continue on in farming. But the real hit in farming came with the election of Franklin Roosevelt in 1932. And that's when you really got the federal government involved in farming in a big way with the agricultural adjustment.
All right, I'm going to stop them right there. And there's actually some crossover. A lot of people don't realize this. I mean, a lot of us communists praise Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was influenced by a huge communist party. He was in competition with the Soviet Union. They were scared and the Soviet Union, and during the Great Depression, the Soviet Union was going great. The United States was in a depression, and they were legitimately scared of uprisings of the people, and the people were organized. But Roosevelt, early on in his administration, did a lot of horrible things. Roosevelt wasn't really a friend of the working class until he was forced to be by the communist organizers. And there's a lot of earlier FDR policies that communists like Steinbeck, I have a book behind me, I don't remember the name of it, wrote about, communist organizers, and wrote about how communists were opposed to the early FDR policies, which they're going to go over here. And a lot of libertarians were like, "Oh, it started with FDR and big government." And yeah, in the beginning, FDR had a lot of horrible policies that were horrible for farmers, which are the ones they mention, but they don't mention about Social Security. A lot of these people are old. A lot of people left in these towns. These towns would be worse off without Social Security. And Social Security was fought for by the Communist Party. And he ain't going to talk about the positive policies that the communists pushed FDR to do. They're only going to talk about the negative ones. Go ahead on with that.
Adjustment Act. And so that particular piece of legislation, the very first piece, the way that the Roosevelt administration viewed the Depression is, well, the problem for farmers is they just can't make money because agricultural product prices are too low. And so they actually paid farmers to plow up perfectly good fields of wheat, corn, and cotton to kill off millions of baby farm animals in order to increase prices. Well, this made zero sense whatsoever. I mean, why would you do this when people are having trouble paying for food?
Yeah.
But that's what they did.
So, like, you have these little communities all over the South that were former tobacco and coffee.
Yeah, and the communists opposed those policies. But you won't hear about that. Sometimes the government, the capitalist government, works for the capitalist, specifically the monopoly capitalist, helps them maintain their profits. The only time the government does something good for the people is when the communists organize to force them to do so. And in the later part of the FDR and Roosevelt administration, because of the competition for the Soviet Union, because of the Mass Communist Party, we were able to get things like Social Security, the Wagner Act, allowing us to have labor basically legalizing, giving legal protections to labor unions, and that was won in the 40s. And honestly, the union movement in general, even though there's less of a union presence in North Carolina, having unions in the North benefits the entire wage market. It benefits workers in the South. I talk about there's some auto manufacturing here, and I trained a guy to drive trucks, and he was talking about how they were scared a union was going to come in, it was going to cause all kind of trouble, and I'm like, the reason why you're paid as much as you are is because the national wage prices are basically raised up by workers in the North fighting for better wages. One less worker with a good job, looking for lower wages, benefits all workers. A victory to one is a victory to all.
Cotton hubs, manufacturing and textiles as well. And now these places are dying off. The size of the community is half of what it was in the 50s. A lot of poverty, a lot of crime, a lot of blight in these little communities that I've driven through in Eastern North Carolina and South Carolina as well. What's the main, who's to blame for this? Is it big scale farmers that have bought up all the small farms and now there's no farming jobs? Is it the government getting involved and killing off?
Yeah, well, government involvement certainly has not helped anything, but there's another aspect to this as well, and that's
wrong. Social Security, labor laws, The little bit of infrastructure and safety net we are the only few improvements we have. These people are neoliberal policies, destroy things, make things worse. This is ridiculous. The fault is monopoly capitalism, and the monopoly capitalists control the government, use the government for their end. But the government, without a government, it would be absolute tyranny. It'd be direct rule by the monopoly capitalists over the people. The monopoly capitalists hire their own army. It would be absolutely ridiculous. Government is absolutely necessary, and it's the only way to organize society in a democratic way. The problem is the monopoly capitalists control the government, and the people should control the government through transition belt organizations and enact socialism and have a government of action to fight for working families that can own the banks, that can reinvest in manufacturing, that can reinvest in housing, and can lift up and unleash the labor power, potential, creativity in these communities that are being destroyed. Human lives are being destroyed. Human thoughts and potentials are being destroyed by the monopoly capitalist. And there is no libertarian policy to the problem. There is only a people power, people controlled government, government of action, the fight for working families, for the way out of the crisis to improve the people's lives from the hood to the holler.
You know, as technology has improved and you have these large scale farming instruments, you know, large tractors and with plows and that sort of thing, that's going to mean to make the capital worthwhile, you have to produce on a larger scale, you know, a larger volume. And so to a degree, to the extent that it's technology driven, some of this was bound to happen, where you just don't need as many people involved in agricultural enterprises as you once did. So that is part of it. And then once again,
Marx explains this: the falling rate of profit, the need to constantly improve the machines in the capitalist system, putting people out of work. This is all described by Marx a lot better than these guys.
You know, these rules and regulations that prevent you from making a go of it.
We could have rules and regulations that actually benefit the people if the people had control over the government.
Once you try to sell a product, even if you've got a small farm and you just want to grow some stuff and you produce more than you'll use, well, you can't go out and sell it because all of a sudden you fall under agricultural department regulations. And
that's enough of those guys. We're done with them. I'm going to remove that and call it a night. I actually wanted to play. Let's see. End this. Okay. I wanted to go out tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I know this is a short live. I went for an hour. If anybody wants to get in the comments, anybody got a question, I'd be willing to answer or respond to the question. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about my other brother, my brother Ryan, who's no longer with us, who was a musician. And he had he was very emotional. He was very sensitive. And I remember him working in a convenience store. And he hated being so superficial and they try to get you to upscale people. I worked in a convenience store, and I've got a real passion for helping people and promoting solidarity and being genuinely honest with people. But that's not what they want you to do as a convenience store employee. What they want you to do is they want you to upsell people. They want you to sell people more cigarettes. They want more gambling and lottery and booze. They want you all those horrible things and horribly unnutritious food. They want that's overpriced, and it's the only food around because it's a food desert. And the closest place that has nutritious food is completely overpriced, and it's several miles down the road. And and as a convenience store clerk, you're expected to like upsell people, not actually help people. And my little brother had this job, and it just ripped him up emotionally. He's big spirit like mine, wants to help people. And my little brother went from job to job, couldn't really find his way, and he had trouble getting a car. I had trouble getting a car. I rode bicycles my entire high school experience. Um, there was actually a rape, an attempted rape or sexual assault on the bus on my to and from high school, and I didn't like seeing sexual assault on the bus, and I reported it to the school, got this person suspended. And then I had death threats, and I was like, fuck that. I don't want to ride the bus no more. And I started riding my bicycle to and from school, 7 miles to and from school. We talked about, jumping railroad cars and how you literally kill yourself. And then I rode my bicycle 7 miles because I didn't want to have to deal with the bus. And I was in marching band, and I worked at a soul food restaurant. And then after I rode and I went to college, I got bicycled around there. I never could really afford a car. I ended up getting a moped, a scooter. You start to see these things more and more. These scooters are dangerous. I mean, they use them in Asia and every place. But in the United States, when everybody else is driving these huge pickups, zooming by as fast as they can to get to the job, to pay for that big old pickup with a big old banknote and a big old interest rate, and they want people on bicycles and mopeds to get out the way. We're also trying to get by. You got it worse off than the people paying all that money to that bank. Mopeds are dangerous. I rode mopeds. Moped was my only form of transportation up until after I was married. After I got married, I kept a moped, and my wife had a car. And it wasn't like till several years of being married that I actually got my first four-wheel vehicle, 2001 Silverado, which was several years old. I got married in 2014, so it was already like 13 years old, 13-year-old pickup. Um, and I had a trade. This is me. Regular folks. I mean, I make a little bit more driving trucks. Going out, it still ain't enough, and they overwork you. But even that's more than people that got nothing. And I couldn't even afford an old pickup. I don't know where all these people get this money from, to be honest with you. And then all these folks with big money up in Charlotte and Raleigh, Durham, and all this. And I ended up. So my little brother, he ended up, trying to find a job. He was living with my dad, and he rode a moped. And he was actually he found this job at a thrift store about 20 miles. He was driving his moped 20 miles a day to a thrift store where he could make minimum wage. And he really loved working at a thrift store because I'm really big into thrifting. You see all the VHS tapes behind me. I collect records and tapes and everything. And he would find the coolest stuff at the thrift store and give it to me. I'm his older brother. He found some cool records and stuff he gave to me. And he was going down there, getting minimum wage, driving forever on a moped, coming back. About 2 years ago, when he was coming back from work, somebody hit him in the back a scooter, and he's no longer with us. I've driven motorcycles, mopeds, 18 wheelers. You might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But, he was already kind of depressed because of situations and lack of jobs that really mean anything. And that really tore me up. And if you look at the thumbnail, he wrote that kind of he did that thing about this town. And I'm going to play a song that he did. And this is going to play us out.
This town, it's a do-nothing town. It's a do-nothing town. This town, it's a getting trouble town.
Sounds pretty good.
This town is a wander around town. Is there nothing to do town? So get you downtown. Take you for a run. It'll take you through some hoops. Oh well, oh well, oh well. This town is a get into trouble town. There's nothing much else to do. This town is not a well-to-do town. Take you for a skip and a hop. Oh well, oh well, oh well.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. No government is not the answer. Getting rid of the government ain't going to fix it. We need a government that works for the people. To get a government that works for the people, you got to get the people united, get the people organized, get the people talking to each other, get the people to build workers' power on the road to socialism so we may have all power of the people. Thank you, comrades. Good night.